Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as the MSM continue their deranged campaign to impose Jeremy Hunt as PM, this show attempts to hold the failed former Health Secretary to account for credible allegations of COVID authoritarianism.
Was Nadine Dorries right when she said that you wanted to drag people out of their homes and put them into isolation hotels during COVID? These are quite crucial questions, Jeremy, for someone who wants to be Prime Minister.
I call for Boris to rediscover his conservative values and cut taxes to keep his lockdown-loving rival at bay in the digest next. Then I'll get the thoughts of my superstar panel, the Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. It's the censorship storm that's exposed the tension between freedom of expression and religious beliefs. Now, the two men at the centre of the Lady of Heaven storm, exec producer Hussein Ashmir and Maulana Shahid Alem, the imam and writer who organised some of the protests, will debate whether Cineworld should have banned the film about the Prophet Muhammad's daughter after Muslim outrage. I'll get your vote on this too. It's going to be an important clash at 9:25. As shadow levelling up Secretary Lisa Nandy comes out in favour of the crippling RMT strikes.
To avoid the strikes, and we're on the public side on this, we're also on the rail workers' side.
Should the government rush through a new law to ban these walkouts and prevent a summer of discontent? That's our big debate at 10. Should working class students aim lower when it comes to higher education?
You know, we imagine this idea that, oh, everyone needs to get to Oxbridge, everyone needs to be this top lawyer in the city. But in fact, the reality is that we have a variety of children with a variety of different talents.
Social Mobility's our Katherine Birbalsingh has been slammed by all the usual suspects for stressing the importance of taking smaller steps instead of obsessing over Oxbridge. She's uncancelled and explaining her comments at 10:40. How did we get to the stage where the MSM are not even trying to hide their hatred of Boris? Well, one of the country's most eminent news broadcasters, who's now part of the GB News family after seeing the culture change at ITV News, Alistair Stewart, is tonight's outsider at 9:40. And sticking with Boris, despite leaving the Tory party over Brexit, political firebrand Anne Widdecombe says it's time to rally around the PM and save the country from a disastrous socialist coalition. She's let loose in Big Witty style at 9:50. As the parents of a 14-year-old seek answers from social media over her suicide, Star Daily Telegraph columnist Celia Walden explains why she's terrified of letting her preteen daughter anywhere near these god-awful apps. That's at 10:15 tonight. Should maternity leave be banned? Well, that view got a high-flying TikTok exec dumped from his role, but do my panel agree? Plus, can we trust the most ruthlessly ambitious politician out there, Michael Gove, when he says this?
You've not always been an enthusiastic friend or supporter, have you?
No, I made a mistake in 2016, a misjudgment.
Right, we'll dive into all of that in the Media Buzz at 10:30, and at 10:50 I'll crown my final Greatest Britain and Union Jackass of the week. Tomorrow's newspaper front pages on the way throughout the show too. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. On Monday night, GB News turns 1. It has been quite a year, my God. But I think it's important for me to acknowledge you for standing by us, for spreading the word and making us a success these past 12 months, especially when we were being written off in our early days. Because mark my words, the establishment wanted GB News to fail. So did virtually all of the mainstream media, especially the BBC. So did the Blob, so did the woke advertising industry, so did virtually all of Westminster. They didn't want their cosy little setup to be challenged. Well, we have challenged them. And yeah, we're scrappy, I'm not going to deny that, but we're not going anywhere. And that is all down to you. I never take that for granted. This show was the first regular broadcast on GB News at 9 p.m. on Sunday, June the 13th, 2021. Look. And on a personal note tonight, I want to welcome you and thank you for being part of this news revolution. The brilliant, and I have to say very agile team at Tonight Live have been working so hard behind the scenes to create this new 24-hour news and radio network. I think because we know how important it is for the UK to have an alternative. I mean, believe me, we have found that out over the past year if we didn't already realise it. So stick with us tonight, especially because we're using brand new technology. Forgive us for that. But in the days and weeks and months and years to come, we will fight for you every step of the way. That is my promise. And I promise you that we will keep fighting for you. Do you know, I'm actually wearing the same suit tonight, and it still fits just, which is good news. So happy birthday, GB News. Sadly, I'm not here on Monday night to celebrate. As I mentioned to Mark Stein, I'm off for a fortnight to return to my birthplace of New Zealand, somewhere I've actually been banned from for the past 2.5 years by that awful COVID dictator Jacinda Ardern. But I'm going to see my beloved mum, dad, sister and my newly born niece, Ivy Dan. But don't worry, the brilliant Patrick Christie's will be in for me, and all of the usual members of our amazing Dan Wootton Tonight family will be with him too, as usual. Now, let's get on with tonight's show. Ray Addison is going to kick us off with the headlines at 9 p.m.
Thanks, Dan. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has condemned death sentences handed to 2 British men captured whilst fighting in Ukraine, describing it as a sham judgment with absolutely no legitimacy. Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner appeared in a Russian-backed court in Donetsk, accused of mercenary activities. A Moroccan national was also sentenced to death. Boris Johnson's spokesman says under the Geneva Conventions, prisoners of war are entitled to combatant immunity. Aidan Aslin is a former constituent of MP Robert Jenrick. Speaking earlier in the Commons, he called for their release.
I hope that my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, will summon the Russian ambassador to the Foreign Office at her earliest convenience to convey a clear message that you cannot treat British citizens in this manner. And both Aidan and Sean should be freed and returned to their family and friends either in Ukraine or home here to the United Kingdom as soon as practicable.
The Prime Minister says nobody should be locked out of home ownership because of where they live or when they were born. Earlier in Blackpool, Boris Johnson announced plans to extend the right to buy scheme to housing association tenants. He says 2.5 million homes that are part of associations leave people, quote, trapped because they can't buy them. He argued that housing benefits could go towards helping people secure mortgages, adding it's time to, quote, unbolt the door to ownership.
We will finish the right to own reforms Margaret Thatcher began in the 1980s, ending the absurd position where first-time buyers spend their life savings on flats only to find themselves being charged hundreds of pounds for painting their own doors or even unable to own a dog. That's what being on your side is all about.
For the first time ever, filling up the tank of a typical family car costs more than £100. The average price for a litre of petrol has reached a record 182 pence, with diesel at a record 188 pence. It's after the biggest daily jump in petrol prices for 17 years. The RAC has called it a truly dark day for drivers. Police searching for 2 people missing after a boat capsized in Devon have recovered 2 bodies. Devon and Cornwall Police say they made the discovery during a large-scale search of Rodeford Lake near Oakhampton. The motorboat carrying 6 people capsized around lunchtime yesterday. Police say formal identification is yet to take place. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now let's get back to Dan Wootton tonight.
So it's very obvious now to see which people, organisations, journalists and broadcasters are so determined to continue on an almost deranged mission to depose Boris Johnson that nothing else matters. Not even major policy announcements on housing, which I'll come to in just a moment. Yes, BBC News, I'm looking at you. It's also very obvious to see that exactly the same people, organisations, journalists and broadcasters are so determined to impose failed former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt as Prime Minister. Days after the Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries made a highly credible allegation that when she was Health Secretary, Hunt telephoned her to advocate the government aping the Chinese approach to COVID of removing folk who test positive for the virus from their own homes and locking them up in government facilities, no one has tried to question Hunt on his authoritarian tendencies. So I sent my producer Ben Leo to see if Hunt would have the balls to address the accusations directly.
Morning, Jeremy. Ben from Dan Wootton show on GB News. Was Nadine Dorries right when she said that you wanted to drag people out of their homes and put them into isolation hotels during COVID? And why did you think the public would tolerate that? These are quite crucial questions, Jeremy, for someone who wants to be Prime Minister. You also demanded mandatory vaccinations and said that you admired China's zero COVID policy. People think you're a very dangerous man for that. Are they right? And why are you planting stories in the Telegraph newspaper saying that Boris should make you Chancellor? You're welcome to come on Dan's show anytime, Jeremy, to answer these questions, especially if you'd like to be Prime Minister. Have a good day.
No denial there. And certainly no balls either. The invitation to sit down with me the moment I return from my holiday stands, and my producers will be asking Hunt on a regular basis. But I repeat, Jeremy Hunt in power would be a dream for the globalists and the Ramon establishment. It cannot happen. That's why it's important the Boris fight back sees him embracing conservative values, most importantly tax cuts. So in a major reset speech in Blackpool this afternoon, tackling the cost of living crisis and housing by supercharging the right to buy scheme, the rhetoric was at least good.
The global headwinds are strong, but our engines, the great supercharged ultra-green marine propulsion units of the UK economy, are stronger. We will get through it. And while it's not going to be quick or easy, you can be confident that things will get better. It's an aberration, the burden of tax, caused in no small part by the fiscal meteorite of COVID. And it must come down, because the answer to the current economic predicament is not more tax and more spending. The answer is economic growth. In expanding and encouraging the private sector, it's time for the government to stop spending and to start cutting taxes and cutting regulation.
By the way, of the 6 questions posed to the Prime Minister, only one journalist decided to focus on Westminster psychodrama rather than the important cost of living and economic issues. And no surprise, that person came from the BBC. Look.
Thank you. Chris Mason from BBC News. Many people, Prime Minister, are desperately worried about the cost of living, and yet they see in you a Prime Minister described by a former Conservative leader, no less, as someone driving down the motorway with 2 flat tyres. Why should people believe you when you say you can deliver, when 40% of your MPs don't think you can?
Right, Chris, I mean, there I was, really hoping that you would talk about all the things that we're doing to take the country forward, but never mind. I venerate the organisation from which you come.
Shame, I thought the new BBC political editor might be different. Now, however, for Boris, action must follow rhetoric. I was concerned actually last night by the scoop from our own political correspondent Tom Harwood, who revealed, responding to a question from a Cornwall MP, Chancellor Rishi Sunak gave strong hints at the 1922 committee this evening that he is considering hiking taxes on second homes, all with Tiverton in mind, no doubt, yet this would raise the tax burden yet further. No, Rishi, you're just not getting it. No new tax hikes, full stop. We've got to go the other way. And just to be clear, I've given a number of people who tweeted me, no, I don't own a second home. But as Boris said earlier, a big spending, high tax approach is fundamentally unconservative. And you can only blame the impact of lockdowns and the Ukraine war for so long. I mean, even the OECD warned yesterday that the UK is facing recession unless taxes are cut. So now the time has come. Boris simply must cut taxes to save the economy and his own premiership, regardless of what Rishi thinks. To respond now, my superstar panel, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Dominique Samuels, the rhetoric was good today, right? But we've actually got to see the tax cuts now. We can't keep talking about cutting tax. We've got to have tax cut.
Yeah, the issue is that the Prime Minister is in an extremely weak position following the confidence vote, and it seems that it's his Chancellor Rishi Sunak that is holding off on these tax cuts.
Although I'd argue he's in a weak position now too.
He is in a weak position himself, and what it makes the government look uncoordinated, and as many people have said, the government looks like it has no vision. So if Rishi isn't going to get on board with tax cuts, I think he should go, and he's falling out of favour with a lot of people. And if he isn't going to give people what they want and what the Conservative Party wants, which is tax cuts, which, by the way, would be extremely beneficial for the country. It allows people to keep more of their money, it allows people to spend more, and actually incentivises them to be active within the economy. And also it might incentivise them to work more hours and actually pump up the labour force, which is what we actually need. If he's not going to do that, I think Boris should get rid of him.
Sean Bailey, do you agree? We've got to cut taxes, Rishi, or you got to go, mate?
You definitely need to cut taxes. What we're looking at is a country that's paying for the pandemic. So the national insurance rise, it's going to happen, and I don't think anybody can say we shouldn't support social care in particular and the NHS, but we do need to cut taxes. And what's really important, you reach the point that if you want to help the poorest people in the country, cut their taxes, because they spend the money, it gets into our economy, and we all benefit from that. Make sure that people have an incentive to spend, make sure people have an incentive to invest. The idea that we can keep building the state and it have no effect is wrong. It will just simply damage us. But I want to quickly turn to the BBC and why they won't promote Boris's actions, be it when they're positive. I think they need to be really careful, because what they're sending the message to politicians of all stripes is, if we don't like you, we will take you on. And what they'll find is they will be attacked by politicians. If you want to play the political game, don't be surprised when politicians try to dismantle the BBC.
I mean, Amy, wasn't that a disgrace from the BBC's political editor today? Massive announcement on the right to buy scheme, a big new vision from Boris Johnson to reset his premiership, and immediately they hark back to the Westminster psychodrama. To me, Amy, that's the BBC letting down its viewers.
I think that it's the BBC doing an absolute credit to their viewers, because let's look at this for what it was. It was a massive distraction so that we stopped talking about the fact that half of Boris's own party is against him. It's now you're either a Conservative, pro-Conservative...
So the right to buy scheme
Boris.
was just a political distraction?
I think that the right to buy scheme is... He keeps talking about delivering. When you look at this, it's impossible to deliver because how can bricks to benefits to bricks? It can't make sense because these people at the moment on lower incomes, they can't afford to heat their houses or afford... They're using food banks, so they can hardly afford to save up a deposit. It literally makes no sense.
But that's the whole point of this scheme.
On universal credit...
That's the whole point of this scheme.
If you save if you have over £6,000 of savings, they cut your universal credit. So where is the possibility that these people on lower incomes will be able to benefit from this scheme? The way we solve this scheme... If I could just finish the point with the solution, because I'm never allowed to... The solution would be to create and build more affordable housing. That would solve this housing crisis.
Although, Sean, Boris did say quite clearly today for every house that went, as a result of the right to buy scheme, went into private ownership, a new home will be built.
Here's the thing.
It's had a long time to do that.
Here's the thing. This government has earned the right to do right to buy. They've already built 400,000 homes across the country. Even here in London, where Sadiq Khan has failed, the government are picking up his slack elsewhere in the country. But here's the important thing. What do the people of this country want? Wherever you survey people, anywhere in this country, they overwhelmingly tell you they want to own their own home.
But that's why
so Boris making this announcement isn't about politics. It's about giving people what they want.
It's pure politics.
If every time the Prime Minister and the government make an announcement, they're told they're trying to distract. Actually, it's people trying to distract from the fact that they're trying to run the country. At some point, the politicians in charge have to do something, and today he did something.
He drew up a plan. It has about as much meaning as me writing £50 and then handing it to you like that. It means nothing. He often does this, he never delivers, and he's done it so that people go, oh, that's worth voting for.
Dominic, I just want to talk to you about Jeremy Hunt. So I sent my producer, Ben Leo, to speak to him, because no one in the media seems to give a damn about this revelation from Nadine Dorries that he was advocating for this zero COVID policy and was wanting to lock Brits up into their homes. This is the man who the media seem to think should be Prime Minister, who the political establishment seem to think should be Prime Minister. Absolutely. And he wasn't prepared to answer the question.
Of course he wouldn't be prepared to answer the question because it goes against the sort of glossy facade that he's tried to create for himself. I mean, wasn't he on GBNews not long ago? Saying
I would never have locked down.
Yeah, saying that he would never have locked down when we know that you actually were very admirable of Chinese-style lockdowns. The man shouldn't be anywhere near office. And a lot of people forget he was lamenting mandatory vaccinations being rolled back for care workers, saying that, in fact, he would have gone a step further and mandated flu
I know.
vaccines.
He's an authoritarian.
But you are happy to have a Prime Minister who put people testing positive COVID back in care homes and caused countless deaths.
Well, I think
absolutely not. That was a huge mistake.
Exactly.
But I would say I'm very, very critical of Boris, but I would say that's less the Prime Minister himself and more Matt Hancock.
Yeah, and that was a huge buck by Matt Hancock. And if you watch my interview with Matt Hancock in the lockdown inquiry, you'll see that I absolutely grilled him on that because it is one of the worst decisions that the UK made at the start of the pandemic, and no one is saying that it wasn't. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Dominic, Sam with Way, Superstar panel, they are here all night. But coming up, how did we get to the stage where the MSM are not even trying to hide their hatred of Boris? For one of the country's most eminent news broadcasters, GB News star Alistair Stewart breaks down the culture shift that saw him turn his back on the MSM. He's tonight's Outsider at 9:40. But up next, should Cineworld have banned a film about the Prophet Muhammad's daughter after Muslim outrage? Well, two of the men at the centre of the Lady of Heaven storm are among tonight's Clash lineup. Exec producer Hussein Ashmir and Mowana Shahid Aim, the Amman and writer who organised some of the protests. So let me know what you think about this too. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk, tweet me at GBNews. We've got a poll running there too. The results after the break.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGiven from the Met Office. The cloud and rain that we've seen in the west through Thursday will work east overnight, but break up to clear spells and just a few showers. However, the main theme over the next couple of days will be the wind. An unusually deep area of low pressure for early June is approaching the northwest of Scotland. It's expected to give widely strong winds during Friday and Saturday, and in some exposed spots, the risk of gales. But although it will be a breezy night, well, by the early hours of Friday, I think we'll see increasingly broken cloud, clear spells. Still 1 or 2 showers towards the south and the far northwest, but in between, under those clear skies, temperatures falling. Not as far as they would if we didn't have the breeze, however, so still the teens for many as we start off Friday. A mild start, 16 in London, 13 across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And then a bright start for many, but the cloud will quickly build. We'll see a few showers developing over Wales, Western and Northern England, but the most showery weather will affect Scotland and Northern Ireland. Frequent and heavy downpours here, brought in on a strong wind. Coastal gales for Western Scotland, 14 Celsius in Stornoway, more like 24 Celsius for London, where the wind won't be as strong, and we'll see plenty of sunny spells in between the cloudier conditions. Cloud does thin and break overnight, leading to clear spells for eastern and southern England. But for Wales, for northern England, as well as Scotland and Northern Ireland, we keep the cloud and some more prolonged rain coming in for western Scotland on that strong wind. Because, of course, it will be a blustery night again, those temperatures will hold up once more by dawn on Saturday. It's not a cold start to the weekend, 13 or 14 Celsius for many. The cloud quickly builds on Saturday morning. We'll see further showers for many. 1 or 2 reaching the far south of England, but the most showery weather will be towards the north and northwest, with again that blustery wind over hills and exposed coasts.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Alistair Stewart and Anne Widdecombe coming up, but now it's time for The Clash. More cinema chains have come under pressure to axe a new Islamic history film after Cineworld caved into angry Muslim protesters who claim it is blasphemous. The Lady of Heaven is a British flick written by a Shia Muslim, but it has riled Sunni Muslims with its depiction of the Prophet Muhammad's daughter Fatima and some of the holiest figures in Islam. So here's a reminder of how one cinema manager in Bolton gave in.
Let him talk 1 minute! Just 1 minute, lads!
I am the manager of this cinema, and I'm just confirming that this film is cancelled tonight. And for the rest of this week, we will not be showing this film again. We will not be showing this film again.
Cineworld then cancelled the film everywhere over fears for the safety of its staff, while protests have since erupted outside of View Cinema in Westfield Stratford Shopping Centre in East London. This was one of the threats being made by protesters.
Birmingham will not tolerate the disrespect of our Prophet, peace be upon him, and there will be outcomes from your actions. You will have repercussions for your actions. We have been trained from birth that we must defend the honor of our Prophet, and we will lay our life on the line.
Critics have pointed out that we don't have blasphemy laws in this country and argued our right to freedom of expression in the arts should trump contention over the depiction of religious figures. But I want to know what you think about this one. It's highly controversial. Should Cineworld have banned The Lady of Heaven after Muslim outrage? Email me, dan@gbnews.uk, tweet me @gbnews. You can vote in our poll while you're there. But my roster for tonight's clash includes two people at the very centre of this storm. The film's executive producer, Hussein Ashmir, is joined by imam, writer and organiser of some of the protests, Maulana Shahid Alim. I'm also joined by teacher and activist Aisha Ali Khan and lawyer Khalil Yousaf. So it's great to have all of you here. Look, I'd like to come first to you, Maulana, because, of course, you have been leading some of these protests. Why? If you don't like this film, don't go and see it. Why do you want it banned?
First of all, thank you very much for having me here today. And just a small correction, my surname is Ali. So it's Maulana Shahid Ali. Anyway, this film we find very divisive and very inflammatory, and we find it to misrepresent 2 billion Muslims across the world, because this film depicts our central figures of our religion, the foremost caliphs of Islam, Abu Bakr and Umar, Allah be pleased with them both, as terrorists, as people who conspired to murder the daughter of the Prophet and actually murdered the Prophet as well, according to this film narrative, and even murdered the unborn son of Lady Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And we find this extremely disturbing, where this film is drawing parallels with these first caliphs of Islam and ISIS, whereas ISIS is a fringe extremist radical movement which mainstream Muslims across the board, across the different various schools of thought, outright reject. So for having a film like this in the UK, I am absolutely shocked that it was even allowed in the cinema in the first place. And I'm also absolutely shocked someone like Yasser al-Habib, who was exiled from Kuwait due to his radical views and radical preaching, how on earth has he managed to pass this movie onto the UK cinema screens? I find this preposterous, outrageous, and I see it as an attack on communal relations and communal harmony between the Sunni and Shia communities.
I'm going to interrupt you there simply because we're struggling a bit with your line. We'll see if we can improve the audio, but I do get the sense of what you're saying. So, Hussein, let me come to you. You're the executive producer of this movie. How do you respond?
Well, thank you, Dan. Thanks for having us in. What I would like to say is Mr. Maulana needs to understand that we live in the United Kingdom. This isn't Pakistan. He cannot allow, or we cannot allow him to speak for 2 billion Muslims. Neither does he or his goons speak for the 500 million Shia that believe and hold this rhetoric in very high demand. So he needs to understand that his beliefs are in line with ISIS views. His beliefs are in line with Taliban, very much pro-Taliban. They were holding, and I saw Mr. Maulana myself in a footage in Bradford with his goons holding placards of ISIS supporters. What does that say? Are we going to let a mob that Mr. Maulana has managed to muster bully the British public, British cinema goers? I mean, it's a shame that Cineworld ended up pulling the film. But they must understand that if they were to give in to people like Mr. Maulana and his goons, that this is what's going to happen. You know, they will come up on various different media outlets and proclaim victory. And the fact is, it's a sad day for British cinema. But View are still holding strong. They've increased their showings in different cinemas, and this is a story that is held extremely dear by 500 million Muslims. He doesn't speak for everybody. He speaks for himself. He speaks to the ISIS supporters. He also speaks to the Taliban supporters. He doesn't speak for all Muslims. Many Muslims have contacted us, and they have been extremely pleased with the film. So, you know, I think he's in his own bubble. He's trying to make a box for everybody to live in, especially the Muslims. And certainly, as I'll once again reiterate, he doesn't speak for everyone. He speaks for himself and for his goons.
Khalil Yusuf, where do you stand on this?
Well, actually, I'm slightly disappointed to hear these two sides of this story, because actually Islam is that religion which is aimed to create peace and to unify people. And I think what's disappointing is that we're in a position where Islam is getting extremely bad publicity, when in fact there are so many positive things about Islam that we can talk about. One point that I do want to make is that everybody, of course, has the right to freedom of expression, but amongst Muslims, and I suspect that the main target audience of this film is indeed Muslims who are interested in the historical facts surrounding the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, and also his successors. And it's disappointing that the film depicted Prophet Muhammad. For all Muslims, the depiction of Prophet Muhammad is something that we broadly, all universally agree shouldn't happen. And I think I'm disappointed that that level of respect that should be given to historical figures has not been given within the film.
According to your view, that's not necessarily the case. That is not the case.
I would say that for the majority of Muslims, they would say that
you do not speak for the majority of the Muslims.
I'm here to offer my opinion, which I'm doing, and
and that's your opinion, and you are entitled to it, because we live in the United Kingdom, and in the United Kingdom, you are allowed your opinion. However, you cannot speak for the majority of the Muslims. There are a majority. I can then turn around and say the majority of the Muslims have no problem if the Prophet was to be portrayed in a beautiful, holy picture anywhere in the world.
And many countries you have tried to do this sensitively in your film, haven't you?
Absolutely. I mean, Dan, it's worth noting that we had the best people in the industry working on this. We spent millions ensuring that the research was done correctly. We spent millions making sure that the best companies in the world that deal with the CGI picture portrayed the Prophet, peace be upon him, in the most beautiful manner possible. And then your guest comes in and says, you know, the majority of Muslims. I respectfully disagree. You are entitled to your opinion because we live in the United Kingdom. And guess what? Yes. In the United Kingdom, we're allowed to have our own opinions.
And we have freedom of expression, especially for the entertainment industry.
Fantastic. I mean, why is that so hard to understand?
I want to bring in Aisha Ali Khan here, who is a teacher and activist. Aisha, are you opposed to the decision by Cineworld to ban this movie?
Hi everyone. Yes, I am. I just want to point out that I am a Sunni Muslim, but I've grown up with many Shia neighbours, and I have very good friends that are Shia as well. So I have
So even as a Sunni Muslim, you're okay with this movie?
I went to see it yesterday. I actually went to the view in Leeds. Surprise, surprise. It was pulled today, so it's no longer being shown up north. It's only been shown in 4 cinemas, by the way, and they're all down south, Reading, Watford, and 2 in London. I don't agree with the protests, simply because it's totally backfired. So beforehand, we had messages basically condemning this film, talking about it, telling us to boycott. And if those kinds of messages had been adhered to, we would not have this massive tsunami of attention and publicity that the film has now garnered. If those people had stayed at home and just boycotted it, because nobody was forcing them to watch it, we wouldn't be in the situation we are today. And I've seen a lot of the footage of people shouting, intimidating, threatening. And I know if I was going to go to a cinema and I saw crowds like this outside, I would turn around and go home. And it's not fair that people who managers and staff in cinemas that were basically turning up and doing their jobs, basically trying to earn a living, being bullied and intimidated and harassed. So I do not agree with that whatsoever. However, picking up some of the points, I did find the movie quite offensive. I was surprised to see the portrayal of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him's face. It was done in a very beautiful, loving way. I totally agree with what Hussein said. But
so you didn't find any of it offensive?
I did. I found some elements deeply offensive. I found.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did. But having said that, I wanted to go and see it because I wanted to make my own mind up about it.
Can you just elaborate on what elements you found particularly offensive?
Well, the historical facts, for example, but that's interpretation. Like I said, I have an understanding of Shia beliefs. I have no problems with what Shias believe because, as far as I'm concerned, everybody should be allowed to believe and practice our faith in whichever manner they want to, because at the end of the day, you have to answer for your own actions and for your own beliefs to the Almighty.
Yeah, so let me bring Khalil. I want to bring Khalil Yusuf back in on this because, Khalil, so Aisha says, look, she's seen the movie. She is offended by certain aspects of it, but she believes that because of freedom of expression, the fact that we're a free country, it should be able to be screened.
So I'm not advocating the view that the film should necessarily be banned. I mean, that's a decision for the British Board of Film Classification and the government as a whole. But what I'm saying is that it's important that the historical facts are represented in a way that represents history relatively accurately. Look, if you're Amber Heard or you're Johnny Depp and you say something wrong, then you're able to go to the courts and say something is wrong, and the courts should then hold the person who has said some untruth to account, and there's a remedy. When you're dealing with historical facts, particularly with religion and things that people find really important, the reality is that there is no legal remedy because you can't bring proceedings for defamation when somebody has passed. And this is one of the reasons why people get very upset when something as important as the successes of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is represented in a way that appears to be a documentary or appears to be an accurate depiction of history when it isn't. So I'm not saying that the Shia community and my friend here, Hussein, should not be able to have this movie, but if there is a significant difference of opinion, then the right way to go in something that appears to be a documentary is to air those opinions from both sides. And unfortunately, both sides of that opinion have not been aired. Okay. And the film has been represented as being an accurate depiction of history when the reality is that it is highly contested.
Hussein, I want to come to you finally. Has this controversy been damaging or positive for the film? And do you feel at all like your personal safety and security is under threat at all, given some of the rhetoric that we've seen from the protesters?
Dan, thank you for that question. I mean, I just want to quickly touch upon the point that your guest here just made. I mean, it's quite clear, we've made it quite clear that this is a Shia Muslim narrative. It's a narrative that is held dear by 500 million Muslims. That's more than the United States population, that's more than the United States, Australia, and other countries. So the fact is that you try to dismiss that as in, you know,
but that this really isn't true. Iran has banned the movie, and Iran is the country with the largest number.
The fact that they have banned the film doesn't make any difference. Iran is a government that is allowed to have their own decisions. But the fact is, they are Shia Muslim country. The fact that the Shia Muslims have a narrative, we should be allowed. This is the United Kingdom. May I remind you, this is not Iran.
No, and I get
this is not Pakistan.
So what happens to the film now?
The fact is, if we are in the United Kingdom and I am allowed, as a British citizen, as a British movie maker...
And I get that point, but what happens now to the film, given that it has been pulled in so many of these cinemas?
Well, it's been pulled by some cinemas, and some cinemas have given it extra showings, and we've had, like I said, a huge tailwind. I mean, there's obviously there are other future projects. This most likely going to maybe see this on Netflix and Amazon. You know, we're speaking to them, so let's see what happens with that. I mean, they're not going to be able to succumb and suppress this narrative.
That would be a big deal. And your personal safety? Do you feel like it's your personal safety? Do you feel it's
Dan, this is something that is obviously usually discussed, but you know, if we start fearing for our personal safety, and if we allow these thugs to intimidate us, what happens? They win, and we're not going to allow that to happen. I mean, the Shia Muslims have been oppressed throughout the world for for over 1,000 years. It's enough. That's not going to happen anymore. You know, we are going to be able to use our narrative in a way where we don't intentionally try to insult anyone. This is a view. You are able and you are allowed to view and disagree with it. But don't tell me that I'm not allowed to. You know, and then you have your films and you have your movies praising the so-called companions of the Prophet. No, hold on. You make films all the time showcasing the companions of the Prophet that you hold to a very high regard, that you know very well that the Shia community will find offensive, yet you do it. And the Shia community stay silent and let you get on with it. But as soon as the Shia community make one film, then the whole world goes up in arms in the UK.
I think this has been a fascinating discussion. I've learned a lot. Thank you so much for having it. Personally, I don't believe in censorship in any form, and so I hope, Hussein, that you are able to get the movie to a wider audience. That is Hussein Ashmir, Maulana Shahid Ali, Aisha Ali Khan and Khalil Yusuf. Thank you so much. So who do you agree with on this? Was Cineworld right to ban this film amid Muslim outrage? Well, Sean on Twitter says this film was pulled from cinemas due to the fear of repercussions. Violence, threats and intimidation are not acceptable ever, and there should be no censorship based on religious belief. From John on Twitter, we can't allow intimidation and mob rule from any religion or ideology to decide what is acceptable in this country. But Dennis on Twitter says the fact that we live in a democracy is being ignored here. Religion is a free choice and should not be allowed to be shackled by anyone. And your verdict is now in. Only 3% of you agree that Cineworld was right to ban the film after Muslim outrage. 97% of you say it should remain in cinemas. Coming up, she turned her back on the Tories, but former Minister and political firebrand Anne Widdecombe is stumping for Boris to save the country from a disastrous socialist coalition, Big Witty style at 9:50. But first, how have we reached the point where the MSM are so brazen with their anti-Boris bias? Mark Dolan tries to get to the bottom of it all in The Outsider next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Anne Widdecombe and Celia Walden are still to come, but first GB News star Mark Dolan is tonight's outsider. Now, I've been spotlighting the media's obsession with deposing Boris Johnson and delight at him facing a confidence vote all week.
Prime Minister set the law. The Prime Minister broke the law. The Prime Minister misled Parliament. Where's his honour?
This massively piles the pressure on the Prime Minister.
You will now be, I think, the first Prime Minister to be investigated for potentially misleading the Houses of Parliament. Very serious, and that could, you would agree, lead to your resignation.
Is there any circumstance in which you would look at those reports and go, OK, fair enough, I'll quit?
24 MPs have publicly called for the Prime Minister to go.
Well, he's clearly in trouble.
I think there are plenty of people that think that he could be mortally wounded and it is difficult to see him recovering.
Will he go down as one of the most unsuccessful Conservative Prime Ministers in history?
Do you think, a lot of people saying, even if the Prime Minister wins this is the beginning of the end for him?
And such coverage has prompted a rare intervention from Alistair Stewart, one of Britain's most eminent and celebrated impartial news broadcasters, who spent many decades as one of the stars of ITV News before joining GB News at our launch a year ago. In a fascinating article for Spiked Online, he writes, "It strikes me that for months now, too many public service broadcasters have actively sought the demise of the Prime Minister. His enemies in government and some who once worked for him have fuelled this with endless leaks, clips and snippets. Much has been attributed to unnamed sources, off-the-record briefings and insiders. Little-known MPs suddenly become senior Tories by dint of simply putting the knife into the PM, and you have to take their word for it." Well, I'm joined tonight by another member of the GB News family who, along with myself and Alistair, have been calling out the MSM week after week, Mr. Mark Dolan. And Mark, this was fascinating from Alistair Stewart, wasn't it? One of the greats of impartial news being prepared to directly criticise his former colleagues at ITV and the BBC for no longer being impartial. And he actually said, Mark, they almost seem to have a sort of joy at the confidence vote in Boris Johnson, as if they'd finally achieved their goal.
Absolutely right, Dan. I mean, part of me wants Boris to fight the next election and win by a massive landslide, purely because it will annoy all of the right people. Those people have used their platform in the media to campaign against Boris Johnson. Now, you'll know in relation to Brexit, there's this syndrome called Brexit derangement syndrome, and it's all those Remainers who can't accept the result. Well, now the media have got Boris derangement syndrome. They think he's the devil incarnate. He's made mistakes. Partygate was an embarrassment. I'm not happy about the number of lockdowns we had on his watch. But he's clearly a gifted politician. He's the Houdini of British politics. And if we've learned one thing about this guy, it's you underestimate him at your peril. And what really upsets me, Dan, is the hypocrisy, the double standards of the mainstream media. So brutal, so hard on Boris Johnson, whilst allowing Beergate hypocrite Sir Keir Starmer completely off the hook.
Indeed, Mark, indeed. But what do you think we can do about this? I mean, the BBC today at this press conference, again, when everyone else is asking about the cost of living crisis and the economy and tax cuts, the BBC immediately go to the Westminster psychodrama. So they don't seem to be listening. They don't seem to want to change. Do people just have to switch off? Is that the only way they're going to get the message?
Well, as you know, many thousands, hundreds of thousands are coming to GB News and your brilliant show, Dan. Congratulations on your things. The bottom line is, we're offering an alternative, a different voice. I think that the more that you try to brainwash people against Boris Johnson, the more they'll push back at the next election. There are going to be millions of shy Tory voters, shy Boris fans, who may well vote for him in their numbers. Why? Because he can define what a woman is, because he's the guy that got Brexit done. And he's offering still always a message of optimism for this country. You've got Keir Starmer, who just wants, everybody to think they're a victim. He's going to spend more money by giving public sector pay rise to all public sector workers. So I think the choice will be clear at the next election. I think Boris has survived this week that tough vote in the Commons. I sympathise with the MPs who weren't happy with Boris, but I think it's now time to move on, although guarantee you one thing, the media will not move on, Dan.
No, that's for sure. They made that very clear. Mark Dolan, thank you so much, Mark. And of course, Mark will be here tomorrow, Friday, Saturday night, Sunday night, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. with Mark Dolan tonight. It is unmissable TV. But coming up, as Labour's Lisa Nandy admits she backs the biggest industrial action since the general strike of 1926, should the government rush through a new law to ban RMT strikes and avoid a summer of discontent? My superstar Our panel return to debate after 10 in the Media Buzz. You'll get a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages then too. But first, are the treacherous Tory rebels stoking the Conservative civil war, risking election defeat and a ruinous socialist coalition? Well, former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe has a stark warning for MPs who still refuse to back Boris. She's next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages coming up. But first, big witty style. And Boris continued to get back to important business today as he revealed a renewed right-to-buy scheme during a major housing speech in Blackpool. But the question remains whether the treacherous Tory rebels are prepared to get back to the business of supporting their Prime Minister and party by ending the civil war that's prevented the government from focusing on real issues like the cost of living crisis. Anne Widdecombe is a former Tory minister who has been highly critical of Boris in the past and even left the party over Brexit. But she believes it is now imperative for the country that Boris battles on. So, Anne, continuing this blue-on-blue Westminster psychodrama, do you think that only makes the chances of Keir Starmer becoming Prime Minister more likely?
As I said in my Express column yesterday, very good column every Wednesday.
I always read it, Anne. I always read it. Don't you get me wrong.
As I said yesterday, Labour doesn't have to do anything at the moment. Keir Starmer doesn't have to oppose. He just has to sit and watch while the party opposite just disintegrates in a civil war. And if that's what they want, if the Tories at Westminster don't care if they lose the next election, if they really want a socialist, and it will be a socialist government, if that's what they want, OK, carry on as they are now. The option is to say they'll move on, they'll accept the result of that vote, and that they will become, which they certainly haven't been for at least a year, a cohesive fighting force. That will not only take on the opposition, because they're so feeble, actually, it doesn't require much taking on, but that they will take on the big issues facing the country and persuade the country that they have at least some. No party's got all the answers, but at least some of the answers. Their choice, that's all I'm saying. Their choice. And the more that people like Jeremy Hunt go on television and speak ill of the leader, and the more that they feed the media with all these headlines, the more they feed the media with anti-Boris comment, the more likely it is they're going to lose the next election. And we hear about MPs being worried about holding on to their seats with Boris. Try holding on to their seats with a civil war over the next 2 years.
Well, indeed. And I thought the whole point of the 1922 committee rules were that there can't be another confidence vote for 12 months because Boris has won, the party should unite. But it seems all of a sudden like there's whispers, oh, maybe the rules can be changed. Do they not understand that the whole point is that you can't use confidence votes as a way to get at a leader over time? You have your opportunity. If you lose, you have to shut up for a year.
Well, not only do they not get that, but what they don't get is that if there were to be a rule change and another confidence vote, then by definition, all this internal strife is going to go on. And it's going to go on for months, if that is what they try and do. They can't, of course, just change the rules. There has to be a vote of the entire 1922 committee. That's all the backbenchers. There has to be a vote. So that would have to be organised. Then if they did decide to change the rules to 6 months or something, we then spend 6 months locked in this same argument over Boris's leadership, not able to get on and do anything. And, you know, it's all very well to blame the media, and yes, the media is very heavily biased, but who's feeding them the stuff with which to exhibit their bias? The Tory party. I've seen it before, Dan. I saw it in the major years when we had wrangling, and really serious wrangling with not Boris's large majority, but with a very small majority, and it damaged us so much that there was a record Labour landslide at the next election. Now, I think Labour would have won anyway because we'd been in 4 terms, people wanted a change, but they needn't have won by that sort of margin. We, the party, gave that to them, and now they're doing exactly the same again.
Very good advice from Anne Widdecombe, a woman who has been there before. Anne, thank you so much. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as Shadow Levelling Up Secretary Lisa Nandy comes out in favour of the crippling RMT strikes.
We'll avoid the strikes, and we're on the public side on this. We're also on the rail workers' side.
Should the government rush through a new law to ban these extreme rail walkouts and prevent a summer of discontent? I'll debate that next with my superstar panel. Tonight, I'm joined by Conservative commentator Dominic Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Should working-class students aim lower when it comes to higher education?
You know, we imagine this idea that, oh, everyone needs to get to Oxbridge, everyone needs to be this top lawyer in the city. But in fact, the reality is that we have a variety of children with a variety of different talents.
Social mobility czar Katherine Birbalsingh has been slammed by the usual suspects for stressing the importance of taking smaller steps instead of obsessing over Oxbridge. She's uncancelled to explain exactly what she means at 10:40. As the parents of a 14-year-old British girl seek answers from social media companies over her suicide, should we be letting our kids anywhere near these god-awful apps? Star Daily Telegraph columnist Celia Walden says hell no. She's live at 10:15 tonight. Should maternity leave be banned? Well, saying yes will get you dropped from a job at TikTok, but I won't be cancelling anyone on my panel tonight. We'll debate that freely at 10:30. Plus, which under fire MP incurred the wrath of the Speaker for tapping away in Parliament?
No, she can't possibly be looking at her phone while I'm speaking to her. She can't possibly be. No, she can't possibly be.
Oh, but she was. I'll reveal who in my Media Buzz shortly. Plus, your first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages in just a second. And as wannabe Tory leader Jeremy Hunt refuses to answer our questions on the extraordinary accusations levelled by colleague Nadine Dorries.
Was Nadine Dorries right when she said that you wanted to drag people out of their homes and put them into isolation hotels during COVID? These are quite crucial questions, Jeremy, for someone who wants to be Prime Minister.
Will his silence be enough to see Jeremy Hunt crown tonight's Union Jackass? More on that I'll reveal today's Greatest Britain 2 just before the end of the show, so do start with us. But first, the news headlines at 10 with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Dan. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Foreign Secretary says death sentences handed to 2 British men captured whilst fighting in Ukraine are a sham judgment with no legitimacy. Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner have been accused of mercenary activities by pro-Russian rebels in a court in Donetsk. A Moroccan national was also sentenced to death. Boris Johnson's spokesperson says prisoners of war are entitled to combatant immunity. Aidan Aslin is a former constituent of MP Robert Jenrick. Speaking in the Commons, he called for their release.
I hope that my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, will summon the Russian ambassador to the Foreign Office at her earliest convenience to convey a clear message that you cannot treat British citizens in this manner, and both Aidan and Sean should be freed and returned to their family and friends either in Ukraine or home here to the United Kingdom as soon as practicable.
The Prime Minister says nobody should be locked out of home ownership because of where they live or when they were born. Speaking in Blackpool, Boris Johnson announced plans to extend the right to buy scheme to housing association tenants. He says that 2.5 million homes that are part of associations leave people, quote, trapped because they can't buy. He argued that housing benefits could go towards helping people to secure mortgages.
We will finish the right to own reforms Margaret Thatcher began in the 1980s, ending the absurd position where first-time buyers spend their life savings on flats only to find themselves being charged hundreds of pounds for painting their own doors or even unable to own a dog. That's what being on your side is all about.
The government says it will carefully consider an independent review into smoking, which recommends that people who are currently under 18 should never be able to legally buy tobacco. It suggests the legal age in England should be raised from the age of 18 by 1 year every year until no one can buy them. The report also says tobacco firms should be forced to pay a polluter tax to help smokers quit. For the first time ever, filling up the tank of a typical family car costs more than £100. The average price for a litre of petrol has reached a record 182 pence, with diesel at a record 188 pence. It's after the biggest daily jump in petrol prices for 17 years. The RAC is calling it a truly dark day for drivers. And to the United States now, and a shooting incident has taken place in the state of Maryland. Local media reports suggest that 3 people have been killed. It says the suspected shooter opened fire inside a manufacturing facility in the town of Smithsburg. The sheriff's office says the suspect is no longer a threat. We'll bring you more on that story as we have it. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now on Our Media Buzz. First look at the front pages now. The Independent leads with MPs demanding the release of Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner, 2 Brits who were sentenced to death by pro-Russian separatists for fighting with the Ukrainian army. They face execution in what's being called a show trial, as we heard in the news there with Ray. The Metro also leading on the story. Aslin and Pinner have been sentenced to death by firing squad today in what's been called the latest reminder of the depravity of Putin's regime. Above that, look who's selling the big issue. Some pictures of Prince William alongside merchants of the magazine in central London. Unsurprisingly, the Eye also leading on the story. Russian officials say that the 2 were mercenaries, despite being members of the Ukrainian army units. Above it, a stark reminder of skyrocketing fuel prices. They're reporting that a tank of petrol will cost £100 for the rest of summer, with Johnson pushing for a second fuel duty cut. The Daily Telegraph too are leading with captured British fighters being sentenced to death by pro-Russian rebels. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has condemned the judgment as a sham, and writing in tomorrow's Telegraph, one of Boris Johnson's closest allies, well, formerly closest allies, I think you'd probably say, Lord Frost, has warned the PM that he will be ousted by autumn unless he changes course and, among other things, reverses tax rises. Lord Frost, a good man, just like I was saying in my digest tonight. Now, my superstar panel are back with me. The political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Now, breaking tonight, train drivers are set to join thousands of other rail workers on strike in a row over pay, condemning the country to further transport chaos. The ASLEF union has announced that drivers from Hull Trains, Greater Anglia and Croydon Tramlink will walk out in June and July in separate strikes to those set to be held by 40,000 RMT members at the end of this month. These self-absorbed Marxist unions are attempting to create a summer of discontent with what threatens to be the largest walkout since the 1926 general strike. Meanwhile, Labour's silence on the looming chaos is deafening. The party clearly supports these selfish strikes set to cripple the nation and potentially subject people to blackouts, fuel shortages and empty supermarket shelves, even if they don't quite want to explicitly admit it. But shadow levelling up Secretary Lisa Nandy, she came very close this morning. Watch.
Well, look, we want to avoid the strikes, and we're on the public side on this. We're also on the rail workers' side. I've stood with our rail workers, just like I stood with junior doctors when they protested against the treatment that was being meted out to them by the government, and our nurses as well. The way that you create good public services and a good service for the public is not to attack the people who run those services, who work day in, day out, in order to try and keep them going. The way that you do it is to support them.
Her spokesperson later declined to clarify whether she was in favour of the strikes or not, but I think it's clear which side Labour is on. So how is this kind of walkout impacting critical infrastructure still legal in 2022? Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said last month that ministers are looking at drawing up laws which would make industrial action illegal unless a certain number of staff are working. But these laws need to be introduced now, before it's too late. What do you reckon, Dominique?
Yeah, I would agree. I think also we should probably look at actually expanding what we deem as essential services in the UK. So say, for example, the police service, that's an essential service. They haven't had the best wages or the best job treatment, I personally believe.
They haven't.
They're legally not allowed to strike. And I think that should be expanded for other sectors when it comes to the possibility of people having to face blackouts, not being able to travel and having empty shelves. I think it's completely selfish. And at the end of the day, whilst I sympathise and I think that, you know, people should have the right to strike, workers should have the right to strike, it shouldn't be at the cost of this country running, because we're already at such a pivotal time at the moment. You can't just blackmail the government into handing out more money, because that will cripple the economy itself.
Sean, I don't believe in strikes for that reason. It is blackmail, pure and simple, and I think Boris Johnson has to stare down Mick Lynch in the same way that Thatcher stared down Scargill.
Look, you're completely right. The clue is in the title. They're talking about a summer of discontent.
That's what they want, right?
Exactly what they want. But it's a coordinated attack. You have communication workers talking to now, BT workers talking as well. And what they want to do is pressure the government. But it gives two important roles here. Lisa Nandy's response this morning shows that Labour Party are owned by the union. She couldn't dare go against the unions, because that's where their money comes from.
Well, and also, Sean, she wants to be the leader of the Labour Party, right? So she's going to need union support.
And let's be clear, she may well agree, but she can't be on the public side and on the union side. She has to pick a side. That's the first thing. And secondly, all the things that people on the left have been complaining about, high inflation, cost of living, which are very real, let's be clear, will be compounded tenfold if this strike goes ahead, because it will cripple the country. And the unions will point the finger at the government, but people will point their fingers at the unions.
Amy Nicol, I think Sean's right. Labour cannot be on the side of the unions and the public?
OK, well, Labour have actually, Keir Starmer's made their position very clear that they don't support these strikes, but they do support strikes, because it's very important. You say you don't support strikes, but you just enjoyed your paid bank holiday, which you wouldn't have without people standing up for workers' rights. You wouldn't have
When did I say I
pension.
believe in bank holidays?
You wouldn't have...
I have to work.
You know, what about...
I didn't have the day off, Amy, I was here.
Yeah, well, so was I, actually. But all the things that we enjoy employment-wise, contracts, pensions, sick pay, maternity pay, these all come from people standing up for workers' rights. I don't know whether this particular strike... The things that I do know about it, I think it's a last resort, and we need to remember that. There's 2 weeks left before this strike action is planned to take place.
But Amy, have you looked through the demands? Have you looked through the demands? Do you see how unreasonable they are? Because basically, if you just look at the railways, right? Since the pandemic, the people using the trains are down something like 25%. It's not making money. Demand is way down. They don't want any redundancies, none whatsoever, which you can't enforce on any business. Then they want a pay rise, Amy, of over 11%. Now, you do know lots of train drivers get paid between £50,000 to £60,000 already a year, even though their jobs could be replaced by automation, which I don't agree with. I want to have train drivers, but you understand what I'm saying.
This particular dispute isn't about the train drivers, it's about the service staff, it's about the train platform staff. On average, they earn £30,000.
Well, no, it includes the drivers.
But the point is that No, it doesn't.
The train drivers, it doesn't.
This particular strike doesn't. There's one in 3 weeks' time which does. There's, at the moment, the wages have
Well,
gone
that's
up
what I'm talking about, the RMT strike.
But we need wages to rise in line with inflation, and we need unions to help with it.
Let's take on Amy's point. Amy's talking about we need wages to rise. There's nobody in the country who doesn't want wages to rise. Yeah. But where the unions are in problem, you talked about Boris taking on the unions. Actually, it's the unions taking on the public. We've come through a pandemic, been very expensive for the country. Millions of people in the private sector have lost their employment completely, lost their businesses. So how is it we then use our public funds to shelter these other parts of our economy from any effect at all?
But we just
cannot do that to the public.
When a lot of public sector workers have had pay rises, actually, when private sector...
And I'm sorry, these unions cannot hold the country to ransom. And that is what's going to happen, Dominic. I think, though, I have a theory that these strikes, and stick with me on this because I know it's going to be bad, right? I know it's going to be bad in the short term. These strikes could actually end up being a good thing for Boris Johnson and the Tory party, because the public are going to realise what a Labour government would look like as soon as all of the power moves back to the unions. And by the way, you know, there's going to be students missing GCSEs. There's going to be festival goers unable to go to Glastonbury.
Conservative government looks like.
Yeah, because, Amy, the unions want to get their power back, and that's why they have to be stared down. Dominic, final word to you.
Their power.
I think this would have happened irrespective of government, though, because
they shouldn't have reason to strike.
We've come out of a pandemic. There's a severe economic shock. The previous winter of discontent, for example, that was on the back of economic crises. So this seems to be...
Labour can say whatever they want, Dominic, but there's no way that the Labour government would be able to grant the RMT an 11% salary increase in this economic climate.
No way.
No way.
And they know that. Surely they know that.
Well, they do know that, but that's the problem. They want to get Boris out, and that's what this is about. And as Sean says, the unions are in lockstep with them, and I think it's completely despicable. Well, Lisa and Andy, she's not having a great 24 hours, right? Because prior to showing her hard left credentials this morning, the Labour MP was scolded, I mean, really scolded, by Deputy Speaker Dame Eleanor Lang for tapping away on her phone while being addressed in the House of Commons. It's quite an extraordinary moment, which came after Nandi accused the government of corruption connected to the Levelling Up agenda, an extremely serious allegation that you'd think would deserve the full attention of everyone involved. But classless Labour MPs didn't stop there, shouting at Dame Eleanor when she was speaking in what proved to be the final straw. This is a great moment from Parliament. Watch.
Corrupt point of order, Bob Seeley. This is a very serious allegation. Corruption has been alleged.
So I would ask the honourable lady... No, she can't possibly be looking at her phone while I'm speaking to her. She can't possibly be. No, she can't possibly be looking at her phone while I'm speaking to her. Would the honourable lady please withdraw the... Don't shout at me when I'm speaking from the chair.
Kudos to Dave Eleanor for finally showing Naughty Nandy right up.
Did an impression of you. You last week.
When I'm dealing with you, Amy Nicole.
Don't mention the Queen.
Well, no, you don't slag off the Queen on the day of the Platinum Jubilee. Do you really want to go there again, Amy? Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, thank you so much. And coming up, should maternity leave be banned? Well, a TikTok exec is under investigation for saying he doesn't believe in the concept. My superstar panel return to debate if that's fair in the media buzz at 10:30. More front pages on the way then too. But first, as the parents of a 14-year-old seek answers from social media over her suicide, should we be letting our kids anywhere near those god-awful apps? Well, Star Daily Telegraph columnist Celia Wootton shares her fears about her own preteen daughter next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices. With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Welcome back. Now, the father of a 14-year-old girl who took her own life is trying to find out if abuse on social media led to his daughter's tragic death. Now, this is Mia Janine, who tragically died in June last year after she was reportedly bullied at the Jewish Free School in North London. And yesterday, a pre-inquest hearing was told that Snapchat accounts that may contain vital evidence were deleted on the instruction of teachers just 5 days after Mia's death. 2 other social media apps that Mia is known to have used no longer exist and cannot provide any information. Now, naturally, this awful story has only fueled parents' anxieties about the harm being done to their children online, and the companies behind these god-awful apps appear unwilling or unable to properly safeguard their younger users. So to break this down tonight, I'm joined by the Daily Telegraph star columnist and best-selling author Celia Wootton, who's written about her own fears of her daughter being exposed to the potentially devastating effects of social media. And Celia, I can only imagine that as a parent, you want to try and ban your daughter from these apps. But is that realistic when they operate in a world where all of their friends are on Instagram and TikTok?
Well, I mean, I think that's the point that I wanted to make when I wrote about this tragic story earlier on in the week, because the last thing anyone wants to do is that awful sort of parental thing of, well, my daughter's never going to go near, because the fact is, as you say, this is not going away. It's everywhere you look. It's so deeply ingrained in our society now. And so no one wants to be blaming Mia's, parents for letting her go on social media or anything like that. That is not the. But my point was that, and even the school who are who are at the moment, we're trying to find out how much blame should be dealt to them in terms of did they notice a culture of cyberbullying? Whether you can notice a culture of cyberbullying, I don't know. I mean, that's the whole point of it, is that it operates in the shadows. And it's the media for cowards, isn't it? It used to be that people just gave you a punch in the face and you would go home with a black eye. But the thing that's so particularly evil, I think, about social media is that it's cowards who operate in the shadows, and and people feel ashamed by that bullying and don't tell their parents, and there's no way of anyone calling it out because they're not seeing it.
No, it's absolutely despicable. But the issue that I have, Celia, is that these social media companies, and very often, well, in virtually all cases, right, the tech giants based in San Francisco, they don't seem to give a damn. They want to protect their own backs rather than actually do the right thing. Because
100%.
Yeah.
And the worst thing about the thing that is just unbearable is if you ever read an interview with any tech giant or any of the Silicon Valley heads, none of them let their kids go on social media. So rather like sort of old tobacco barons, who, by the way, never touch cigarettes, it's fine. Everyone else can suffer the consequences, but they're going to keep their kids well away from it. But unfortunately, as you said, I think that's not possible. And even with the best intentions, it's great that we have all these sort of cyber, my daughter, for example, she's 10, she's already had a cyberbullying class at school. But my worry is that there's something about social media, in fact, this is what it's supposed to do, isn't it, that whips you up into such a state that even if you know all that stuff, you're somehow unable to use your sort of rational brain in that moment, which is why we're seeing more and more of these really appalling cases.
Absolutely, because when you're in the eye of the storm, and it doesn't matter if you're a high-profile person, if you're a teenager being bullied at school and all of your classmates are turning on you, you feel like it's the only thing that matters. You feel like everyone in the world is talking about your little social media issue. Of course they're not, but you're right, that's how the apps make you feel. And I think, Celia, where the social media companies should feel ashamed is that they make so much money. They have very low overheads, hardly any staff, and they want to keep it that way. Whereas actually what they genuinely need is an army of staff who can deal with moderation issues, because that's the problem, Celia. When one of these things happen, if you're a parent, I mean, you try and get through to someone at Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, to get some revenge porn or whatever it happens to be taken down. It's really difficult.
It's really difficult. And as you pointed out with this particular case, most of the apps that Mia was on have now disappeared. It's impossible to get any of the conversations that happened in the hours before this poor girl's death. And if you're a parent and you just want to know what was it that tipped you over the edge, I just hope that they are able to find out at some point this week.
I know. Well, I know social media company in cases even involving the police refuse to hand over information because, of course, they're not operating in the UK, and I think they should really have a good hard look at themselves. So, I mean, what do you do in your own personal situation, Celia? Because actually, at 10 years old, I mean, lots of especially young girls now are all over TikTok. I mean, I'm very opposed to it, but I have friends' kids who got their first TikTok account when they were 5 years old.
I know. I mean, it's hard because you never want to judge other parents because people, do whatever they feel is right. For me, I've seen how in love my husband is with social media and the addiction he has to it. And I really don't want. I mean, I do think it is an addiction. I don't really suffer from it. I'm on Instagram, which
I'm in his camp, and it's not a good thing.
Yeah, I know you are, but I think that I know that for some people it can be a black hole that you end up going. And I think particularly for girls, it really homes in on insecurities. in a way that I'm sure it affects boys too, but statistics have shown it's particularly harmful to young girls who, when they're growing up and their bodies are changing, are very, very fragile and particularly susceptible to, a negative comment, which one person which might not even qualify as bullying, but if it sort of gets whipped up, could seem that way.
No, it's absolutely fascinating stuff, very disturbing. And of course, we don't want there to be more Mias. Daily Telegraph star columnist Celia Walden, thank you so much. Now, coming up, should working class students aim lower when it comes to higher education? Well, we have the government's new firebrand social mobility czar, Katherine Birbalsingh, here live to tell her side of the story after the MSM exploded at her comments today. She's uncancelled, Britain's strictest headmistress at 10:40. But next, do capitalism and maternity leave go hand in hand? Well, one TikTok executive doesn't think so and is now under investigation by the big tech giant. My superstar panel debate this next in the Media Buzz. We'll have more newspaper front pages dropping then too.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's return now to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. So The Guardian is leading with low-paid care workers not being able to afford petrol to get to work. The rise in prices means some health care workers have had to call in sick because they simply cannot afford fuel to drive to work. Elsewhere, the paper reports that footage from the chaotic Champions League final in Paris last month was deleted because there were no requests by the French justice system to seize them. I just think that whole thing is such a sham, but at least there was some sort of apology today. The Sun leading with this picture of the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, selling copies of The Big Issue next to the caption, "Just like Mum Diana." More on the Media Buzz now. Tonight's superstar panel return, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. Now, the Chinese-owned tech company TikTok have taken action against a senior exec after he allegedly denounced the concept of maternity leave. Joshua Ma, the head of social media brand e-commerce, across Europe, said that as a self-proclaimed capitalist, he, quote, didn't believe in allowing employees to stop working for the final stages of pregnancy and their newborns' early months. That's according to the Financial Times. Now, Ma is reportedly having to, quote, take some time off and step back from his role at the company, which offers 30 weeks of paid leave for maternity. And that's because he made these comments at a dinner. Now, a TikTok spokesperson has said they were investigating alleged statements and actions to determine whether there has been a breach of company policies, while a staff-wide email from parent company ByteDance reportedly expressed hope that, quote, this painful experience will make us a stronger, closer and better team over the long term. So, look, this man considers himself a capitalist, which is by no means a bad thing. So I think I can understand that he has a right to an opinion on this at very least, Dominique.
Of course he has a right to an opinion, and it's not even like he's saying that he would advocate for the company to change its policy. He's literally just saying his opinion. This is just another example of the thought police trying to persecute people who don't follow their way of thinking.
Do you believe in maternity leave?
Personally, yes, I do believe in maternity leave. I don't think that, you know, women should have their career prospects cut simply because, you know, we like to have children.
What about blokes now? It can be men now too, can't it? Paternity leave.
It depends on the circumstances, I think. Say, for example, the mother's given birth and she's just run off and left the kid. There's no one else to look after it, so paternity leave makes sense. However, the vast majority of cases, I'm not sure I agree with paternity leave. I think it's a bit tokenistic. But in general, yes, I don't think women should be persecuted because they get pregnant.
No, but Sean Bailey, this is chilling, isn't it? Because more and more folk are losing their jobs for expressing perfectly legal opinions that might just happen to be controversial and woke. I mean, by the way, I find it hilarious that TikTok views itself as a woke company, by the way, given it's effectively Chinese government-owned, and we know what they do to the Uyghurs. And by the way, we know how they feel about murdering children too, but anyway.
But there's a serious point here, isn't it? Corporations are so terrified of being cancelled, they are actively controlling the thought process of their employees. I think that's so wrong and something we need to worry about as democracies. And actually, I think we're getting to the point where it should be illegal. Unless you state something as a personal opinion that's illegal, your boss should be able to sack you. And let's be clear,
we have to protect freedom of ideas and freedom of speech.
Speaking on behalf of the company. If he had said TikTok, then they're well within their rights to do that. But he didn't.
He was speaking as a person.
As in a personal capacity. In a personal capacity. I personally do agree with maternity leave and paternity leave. I think they both should exist, but that's his personal opinion. You know, am I going to now lose my job because my favourite colour is blue and the company decides it should be red?
Yeah, people aren't allowed to be ridiculous anymore.
No, it's not ridiculous because he's the boss and he has a fundamental misunderstanding of half of his workforce. So how can he be a good and productive leader of this company?
There's no way you agree with him stepping back because in a personal capacity.
So you're talking about being worried and scared of the thought police. The only thing to worry about is the fact that there's still somebody in 2022, nearly said 22, that has the thought that maternity leave is unnecessary.
But that's his opinion.
So that's his opinion, so he can have that opinion at home. He is in no position to be in charge of a company which has plenty of women who will be...
This is how the hard left in this country now.
Hard left.
Well, what are you?
I'm undecided.
That's not... Because if TikTok had this opinion, or if someone had asked him, in your capacity as leader of TikTok, what are you going to do?
What policies would you change?
That's different.
And that's what would have happened next.
No, it wouldn't have, because he may well be the CEO, I don't know, but he's not a one-man band. He has a board...
Yeah, he's an executive. He's just not all
the point is, it's not TikTok's view. It's his personal view, and that's the only thing.
But I actually think you're right, Sean. There are going to have to start to be legal protections for this sort of thing.
Like with Maya Forstater, where
absolutely,
it was ruled
because today I don't know if you guys have seen this ridiculous tweet from Ben and Jerry's, who are meant to be an ice cream company. Well, I'm glad you didn't, because they're actually my uni in Jackass if I got to choose, because they're meant to promote ice cream. They're railing against the government's Rwanda plan, and the point is, Dominic, imagine imagine, for example, being a Conservative who supported the government and working at Ben & Jerry's? You would be so terrified to express any opinion.
You feel isolated and you would begin to self-censor yourself, and that is a recipe for disaster in any democratic
society.
society.
TikTok man can say maternity leave is bad, but Ben & Jerry's can't.
No, Ben & Jerry's can say it. Ben & Jerry's can absolutely say it if they want to, but I just have to clarify. This is their consumer-facing account, the account that's meant to sell us funky monkey ice creams, telling me what I should think about Rwanda. And you know what? They're absolutely allowed to do it, but I'm also going to make the choice never to eat a Ben & Jerry's ice cream again in my life.
And you can't have a Domino's either.
I think there's a fundamental difference. If your CEO in a private capacity expresses an opinion, that's one thing. If the company starts to tell you what your politics is, that's wrong. And that is constructive dismissal.
What did Domino's do, Amy? Sorry,
somebody put out that the only company that could deliver... Oh, no, Boris can't even deliver as good as Domino's, and then Domino's put underneath... I'm sure we can, or something like that.
Oh.
That's just
but that's Domino's being clever.
That's just a joke.
Yeah, it's great.
I prefer people.
They're showing their opinion.
But to be honest, I do think all of these consumer-facing brands should keep the hell out of politics, but if they want to go there, it's absolutely their right to do so, just like it's absolutely the right of this executive at TikTok to express a personal view that he doesn't believe in maternity.
It's not, because we do have a problem with it. We have
but this is the dangerous thing, though. And in the past, politics used to be something that wasn't freely discussed because we knew it was something that, you know, other people have different views. We don't want to make other people
And by the way, this idea that European-style maternity and paternity leave is completely normal is actually not true. Go to the US, where lots of women return to work about 3 weeks after giving birth. Now, I'm not saying that's either right nor wrong, but there are cultural differences when it comes to the belief of maternity and paternity leave. Personally, and I'll say it because this is GB News and it's what we do, I don't like paternity leave. I don't believe in it. I don't. And people have slagged me off for having this comment.
Why don't you believe in it?
Because I think it's hard enough for businesses as it is without needing to allow these blokes off work for weeks on end, because the businesses have to...
It's 2 weeks, and it's really important to support your partner.
No, but I'm talking about the long-term paternity leave. You know how a lot of companies now allow the men to take a shared portion of the long-term maternity.
That's probably more difficult, but I do believe in paternity leave.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Because as a father, I think you are equally as important in that child's future.
Of course you are.
And you should be part of it as much as...
And then that little child will be blossoming and be a happy little worker and be brilliant for your company when he's older.
Happy little worker.
Now, politics is a dirty business, but Michael Gove arguably has grubbier mitts than most. He and Boris Johnson were once great pals until Gove knifed Bojo in the back during the 2016 Tory leadership contest, rallying the troops against his BFF while he took a stab at the big job. But here's how the Levelling Up minister squirmed on Sly News earlier when quizzed about his infamous betrayal.
What about the leader? How did you vote for him this week? Did you give him your support on Monday?
Enthusiastically, yes. I think that it's...
Because you've not always been an enthusiastic friend or supporter, have you?
No, I made a mistake in 2016, a misjudgment. If you've been in politics for a little while, as I have been, then, there are always mistakes that you can look back on. But no, I think the Prime Minister is doing a good job.
The pair friends again, apparently, but making us forget how he stitched up Boris and his thirst for the Premiership will always be an uphill struggle for Gove. Personally, I'm dubious that sort of ambition ever dies. Once a backstabber, always a backstabber. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, do stand by, because coming up, I'll crown my final Greatest Britain and Union Jackass of the week. But first, should those from lower income backgrounds aim lower when it comes to higher education? The government's new social mobility czar, Katherine Birbalsingh, discusses her radical plans that have caused outrage in all the usual places in just a few seconds, right after a preview of Monday's show. Oh my goodness, I'm not here. I'm going to be missing you so much. But Patrick Christus is. So this is what he's got coming up.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight with me, Patrick Christie's, are the Freedom Convoys finally about to have their names cleared in a massive blow for COVID authoritarian Justin Trudeau? Their spokesperson joins me as the Canadian establishment tries to repair the damage of their smear campaign. Plus, there's unfiltered opinion from Rakib Ehsan, Neil Oliver and positive Professor Carol Sakura. And I'll break down the top headlines of the day with my superstar panel, Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and former Brexit MEP and political commentator Belinda de Lucy. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m, right here on GBNews.
Oh, that show looks so good. I don't know if I want to go away now. I feel like I'm missing out. Anyway, time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. She's celebrated as one of the UK's strictest head teachers, and as the government's new social mobility czar, Katherine Birbalsingh, has adopted a similar no-nonsense approach to ensure more people improve their status. Earlier today, Katherine delivered her hotly anticipated first speech since being appointed chair of the Social Mobility Commission by Liz Truss in October, during which she laid out her radical new plan for social mobility, encouraging folk from lower income backgrounds to take smaller steps up the ladder rather than set their aspirations impossibly high. Things like, entering Oxbridge. Look.
We imagine this idea that, everyone needs to get to Oxbridge, everyone needs to be this top lawyer in the city. But in fact, the reality is that we have a variety of children with a variety of different talents.
Now, Katherine's comments have predictably sparked a backlash from all the usual left-wing critics, with Harriet Williamson of The Independent writing, "To me, this isn't about social mobility at all. It looks a lot like telling people from disadvantaged backgrounds to stop dreaming and stay in their lanes." Well, I'm delighted to say Katherine Birbalsingh, the woman herself, joins me now live. Katherine, you might as well respond directly to that. That's not what I thought you were doing, but it is what a lot of the critics have leapt upon today.
Yes, well, I think that's because they don't really have any respect for people who do a whole variety of different jobs. And it's precisely that I think needs to change. Fact is that, as I said in that clip, in any school, you've got children with a whole bunch of different talents. Can you imagine saying to a child, you need to get to Oxford, but if you don't get there, well, your life is worthless. Not much point in trying after that. I mean, of course, children who want to go to Oxford ought to apply to Oxford, and brilliant, please do. And that's exactly what we do with our children who are wanting to do that. But not everybody wants to become a top banker in the city or a top lawyer. And as I pointed out in my speech to the audience there, I was saying, well, many of us in the audience are not top bankers. We're perfectly happy. I love being a teacher. I love being around children. I'd be miserable as a banker. And there's something wrong with our society when all we recognize as being good is someone who's gone from the bottom right up to the top in terms of income. It's not just about earning lots of money. It's about living a worthwhile life. And it's about finding a career, a job that's going to give you satisfaction and purpose so that you're a happy person. And people have a variety of talents, and it's right that they should be able to do what they want to do. And so, of course, I wasn't saying, I never said we shouldn't be encouraging children to go to Oxford. Of course, we should encourage children to fulfill their talents. But everyone can't go to Oxford. We all kind of realize this. 95% of my kids at school are not going to be applying to Oxford or Cambridge. It doesn't mean their lives are over. It means that they're going to live purposeful and fantastic lives without attending Oxford or Cambridge.
Yeah, so let's talk about our definition of success, and maybe actually as a society we have to change our definition of success, because I don't think, a vast amount of the most successful people I know never went to university, by the way, in the first place.
Exactly. Like, not everybody wants to go to university. Not everybody does A-levels. People want to do a variety of different things. And the fact is, sometimes you want people to be as socially mobile as possible. You don't want people to be prisoners of the circumstances of their birth. And sometimes they want to make shorter mobilities. They don't need to do this massive long stretch so they become some, big CEO and is eating in expensive restaurants in the city. I mean, some people, one of the big things I spoke about was geography. If you're born in Lancashire and you want to stay in Lancashire, you don't want to come down to London and make an absolute fortune and be super rich and famous. Well, that's great. You should be allowed to do that. And the problem we have as a society, we tend to only respect those people who end up in these top jobs that earn them lots of money. And that's not right. We've got things upside down because it's about living a life that's worth living. And it's fascinating, really, that I say that, and then a whole bunch of people here, you're telling people to stay in their lanes. And I think that has to do with the way they feel about people who aren't doing jobs that they really respect. And that's a problem. And that's what I'm kind of taking on here. Because if we stopped just looking at the few, because it's only the few who are going to end up perhaps at Oxford or Cambridge or perhaps in being some top banker. The many, however, are going to do a whole variety of different things. Some of them not going to university, some of them going to different universities, and we should be celebrating their successes just as much as we would celebrate that person who ends up as a top banker.
I couldn't agree more. How do you deal with the issue of kids or teenagers or young people who say to you, I want to be the next Kim Kardashian, I want to be a film star, I want to be a social media influencer, I want to be a TV presenter? Because I get it a lot in my own life. And my approach is to say, look, I think it's great to aim for that, but you also need to think about the alternatives, because it doesn't happen to a lot of people, that level of success. But sometimes people criticize me for that and say, oh, you're trying to dash this person's dream, or you're not being supportive enough.
Yeah, no, you say exactly the right thing. Of course, you can support them to do X, Y, and Z as well, but they must make sure that they're working hard at school and getting a good set of qualifications so that they have doors open to themselves. That is particularly the case if you come from a more disadvantaged background, because the fact is there is inequality in society. There's no doubt that there is some kind of correlation between income and the kind of success that you will have. If you grow up in a richer family, you will probably have an easier time in terms of choice of careers and so on later on. And so the more disadvantaged your background, the more it is that you really do need to work hard at school and make sure that you have some of those credentials and qualifications, because people who are from richer backgrounds can sometimes mess up in various ways, and then they have a contact through their dad or their mom or whatever it is, and then they manage to get on in life, whereas many of my kids just won't have that. So we're very much pushing the idea that you've got to get yourself in a position where you're secure with some decent GCSE results. And of course, life is complex. But one of the things we want to do on the Commission is really look at the people who are bucking the trends. So, yes, society is unequal, but how is it that some people are socially mobile despite that inequality? Because often we can confuse and conflate inequality with social mobility, and they're not the same thing. Inequality is how rich is the richest person, how poor is the poorest person, what is the gap in between? And those might be really large, that gap could be large, but you might still get many people being socially mobile in that gap. And that's what you need to aim for, is to try and encourage as many people to be as socially mobile as possible.
Now, of course, you made the speech today as the chair of this Social Mobility Commission. Now, you're a government appointment. So how does that work? Do they back your speech? Is this something that Boris Johnson and Liz Truss are in support of?
Well, I don't know. You'll have to ask them. We're entirely independent. And so we say what we want. and then I suppose they decide whether or not they like it. I have no idea what they think of it. And they're not one person. She might like it, he might not like it. I have no idea. We are independent and we have our own ideas and we push those forward in a way to hopefully have impact, not just on government, but also on families and people. Right now, we're trying to change the narrative. We're trying to let people know, that social mobility isn't necessarily in decline. It depends on the data that you're looking at, but in particular, if you're looking at occupational mobility, actually it's been stable for decades. And we want to get out some good news stories and think about, as I say, who's doing well, how are they doing well? As we move forward over the next year, we want to look at families, for instance, the importance of families. How do they impact on people's social mobility? The early years and how they support their children then, and then schooling. If you get your child into a good school in comparison to a not so good school, how does that impact on the child's life in terms of their upward mobility?
Well, it is really important work. I loved the speech, I have to say. That was chair of the Social Mobility Commission. And, of course, Britain's strictest head teacher, Katherine Birbalsingh. But time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My superstar panel have returned. Dominique Samuel, let's kick off with you. Your Greatest Britain, please.
Well, my Greatest Britain is Katherine. I think she's absolutely amazing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I hope she's still on the line.
Yeah, no, as someone who comes from a working class background, I know that what she said was completely correct. I didn't go to Oxbridge, I didn't apply to Oxbridge, but I was the first person in my family to even attend university, and that for me was a massive milestone. And, the big bankers in the city, those that go to Oxbridge, that's not the story for the vast majority of working class people, and there's nothing wrong with being a teacher or a plumber, and the middle class lefties who want to sneer at Katherine's comments just show their own hypocrisy and actual snobbery.
Yeah, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with working at Tesco's or McDonald's either, because you're providing for your family.
You're earning a wage for your family.
Absolutely. Sean Bailey, your Greatest Britain nominee.
My honorary Greatest Britain nominee is a 15-year-old Ukrainian boy by the name of Andriy. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's a drone enthusiast, a good pilot, and he used his drone to spot an attack coming on the capital by the Russian forces, which enabled the Ukrainian forces to repel the attack. So I'm just so impressed that young boy showed initiative and just supported his family and his fellow Ukrainians.
And Amy Nicole, your nominee.
My nominee is Siobhan McDonough for responding perfectly to Rishi Sunak's claim that he will give his £400 fuel allowance to charity.
I think we can see this moment,
pointing out that you can't be philanthropic with our money, Rishi, you millionaire.
So I'm donating mine to charity, so I made that clear a couple of weeks ago. So again, just to answer your question...
That's very philanthropic, Chancellor, but isn't it being philanthropic with other people's money?
OK, well, look, I am going to go for...
I think that the Labour Party do. They're philanthropic with our money.
I am going to go for Katherine Birbalsingh as tonight's Greatest Britain after that incredible speech as part of her new role. So well done to Katherine, who obviously we just had on the show. So that was very good. Union Jackass time now. Dominique Samuel's your nominee.
Mine is Jeremy Hunt, former Health Secretary, for having the audacity to think that he should be anywhere near number 10 after his failed record as Health Secretary and also some of the chilling comments that he made about wanting a Chinese-style response to the pandemic.
Well, I've got to play you this great moment earlier today when Ben Leo, our producer, went to track him down.
Wasn't Nadine Dorries right when she said that you wanted to drag people out of their homes and put them into isolation hotels during COVID? These are quite crucial questions, Jeremy, for someone who wants to be Prime Minister. You also demanded mandatory vaccinations and said that you admired China's zero COVID policy. People think you're a very dangerous man for that, are they right? And why are you planting stories in the Telegraph newspaper saying that Boris should make you Chancellor?
Oh, the cat had got his tongue. Sean Bailey, your Union Jackass nominee.
My Union Jackass nominee is Lisa Nandy for her support and the Labour Party's support for strikes that are going to cripple the country at precisely the wrong time.
And Amy Nicole, your nominee?
It's your mate Nadine Dorries for her spectacular own goal of admitting her government were ill-prepared for the pandemic.
Well, I'm actually going to go with Sean Bailey on this, and I think Lisa Nandy is today's Union Jackass because she made it absolutely clear how Labour feel about these RMT strikes, which are going to wreak absolute havoc on this country over the next few weeks. Dominique Samuel, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, thank you for being my fabulous superstar panel this Thursday night. Thank you so much for your company. I've loved this week. I'm going to be away for a fortnight. Patrick Christie's covering for me from Monday at 9 p.m. But now it's time for headliners. Good night.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The cloud and rain that we've seen in the west through Thursday will work east overnight, but break up to clear spells and just a few showers. However, the main theme over the next couple of days will be the wind. An unusually deep area of low pressure for early June is approaching the northwest of Scotland. It's expected to give widely strong winds during Friday and Saturday, and in some exposed spots, the risk of gales. But although it will be a breezy night, well, by the early hours of Friday, I think we'll see increasingly broken cloud, clear spells, still one or two showers towards the south and the far northwest, but in between, under those clear skies, temperatures falling, not as far as they would if we didn't have the breeze, however, so still the teens for many as we start off Friday. A mild start, 16 in London, 13 across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And then a bright start for many, but the cloud will quickly build. We'll see a few showers developing over Wales, Western and Northern England, but the most showery weather will affect Scotland and Northern Ireland. Frequent and heavy downpours here, brought in on a strong wind. Coastal gales for Western Scotland, 14 Celsius in Stornoway, more like 24 Celsius for London, where the wind won't be as strong, and we'll see plenty of sunny spells in between the cloudier conditions. Cloud does thin and break overnight, leading to clear spells for eastern and southern England. But for Wales, for northern England, as well as Scotland and Northern Ireland, we keep the cloud and some more prolonged rain coming in for western Scotland.